The sun was just a low, amber coin sinking behind the mesas, spilling gold and rose across the endless stretch of sagebrush and dust. Wind carried the soft grit of the prairie, brushing against worn boots and sun-baked faces, stirring the memory of every footstep that had ever wandered here. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote's cry echoed, thin and forlorn, as if mourning a world only it remembered. A boy ran across the dry soil, legs kicking up puffs of ochre dust, eyes wide with fear and determination. "Don't bury her, she's still warm," he cried, voice hoarse and trembling. His small hands clutched at nothing, reaching toward the shallow grave freshly dug in a lonely clearing. There was urgency in his panic, a plea carved from the raw bones of innocence, the kind of desperation that makes grown men pause. From the ridge above, a horse shifted its weight. Dust clung to its coat like the remnants of old storms. A cowboy, broad-shouldered and quiet, turned slowly, noticing the boy's frantic figure. His face was lined by years of wind and sun, skin tanned to the color of old leather, eyes steady pools of patience. He dismounted with the soft grace of someone who had spent more nights under the stars than in any home, boots crunching lightly on the dusty trail. There she lay, half-hidden, pale against the muted gold of the prairie, hair fanned like spilled ink across the dirt. Her chest rose and fell faintly, a whisper of life beneath the stillness. The cowboy's heart, steady and slow, stirred at the sight, not for pity, but for recognition. Life so fragile, yet so stubborn, refusing to bend completely. The townsfolk had gathered, curious and cautious. Whispers rippled through them like dry leaves in the wind. A gruff rancher shook his head, muttering about foolishness and superstition. A few women crossed themselves, murmuring prayers, their faces pale with imagined tragedy. None of them understood. She was more than the sum of her wounds. She was not yet a story to be buried. The boy knelt beside her, shaking slightly. The cowboy crouched beside him, careful, deliberate. No rush, no loud words. Only the gentle study of life teetering on a knife's edge. He placed his fingers against her wrist. Pulse, faint but there, warm. Hope, fragile as new grass in spring, stirred in his chest. She coughed, low and rasping, eyelids fluttering open like wings hesitant to take flight. Recognition flickered, confusion softened, and somewhere beneath it all, trust began to bloom. The cowboy whispered to her softly, words carried like the wind through canyon walls. Words she did not fully understand yet, but that somehow told her she was safe for now. The boy's hands trembled less as he helped the cowboy gently lift her. She weighed nothing to him, yet everything to the world around them. The townsfolk's whispers rose in chorus, disbelief mingling with awe. A life saved, but the story was only beginning. They mounted slowly. Dust rose and hung in the golden air, a curtain between them and the judgments of those left behind. The horse moved with careful steps, the prairie stretching endless on either side, bones of old trails hidden beneath the soft brush. She rested her head against the cowboy's shoulder, eyes drifting shut again, and he spoke in low murmurs of nothing, of the wind, of distant rivers and forgotten canyons, of life that persisted even in places where the world seemed to forget it. A dog appeared at the edge of the clearing, thin but fierce, bounding alongside with a joyous bark. It padded in rhythm with the horse, ears alert, tail high, a small, living charm to ward off despair. The boy laughed, a tiny, brittle sound that seemed to stitch together the fraying edges of fear. The wind carried their passage, weaving whispers of what had happened, hints of stories unspoken. The cowboy noticed the small scars along her wrists, the dirt under her fingernails, the way her hair clung in uneven strands. She was strong, yes, but the world had not been gentle. And yet, here she was breathing, blinking against the sun, alive. Hours passed without words. The landscape unfolded in waves of gold and copper, punctuated by the distant cries of birds returning to hidden nests. The cowboy did not hurry. He allowed the prairie to speak, letting silence fill spaces between heartbeats. She began to murmur softly, fragments of memory, half-formed sentences about days that had been unkind, men who had looked and seen nothing, nights that had been too long and cold. The cowboy listened, the boy at her side, without judgment, without interruption. Each whisper, each confession, stitched a thread of trust between them. They reached a small cabin perched at the edge of a canyon, rough-hewn and swaying slightly in the wind. Its windows reflected the last amber light, and a chimney spat thin lines of smoke into the sky. The cowboy dismounted, carrying her carefully as if she were the most fragile treasure in the world. He laid her upon a bed of blankets, the boy helping, hands still trembling but steadier now. She opened her eyes again, slower this time, recognition and faint gratitude mingling in the depths of her gaze. Outside, shadows stretched long across the canyon floor, the day bleeding into night. And though the danger had not fully passed, threats unseen and whispers of past cruelties lingered like smoke. There was a fragile, trembling hope. The cowboy brushed dust from her hair, whispering again, letting her know she was safe, if only for tonight. The boy pressed close, small hands holding hers, unyielding in protection. And in the fading light, as the wind hummed low through the canyon, the prairie itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the story yet to unfold. Section 1 ends here, a quiet pause before the journey deepens, a promise of hope, trust, and courage in the heart of a harsh world. Dawn arrived like a slow sigh over the canyon rim, brushing the cabin with tender gold. Dust motes floated in the thin shafts of light, shimmering as if each carried a memory of the prairie's ancient winds. The girl stirred, eyes opening to the soft glow, and for the first time in days, she did not feel the weight of fear pressing her chest flat. The cowboy moved quietly, carrying water in a tin cup, brushing hair from her face with careful, deliberate hands. No words were needed. The gentleness itself spoke of safety, of patience, of understanding. She took the water slowly, fingers brushing his palm. The boy, perched near the fire, collected dry wood, stacking it with careful attention, keeping watch over the two with a solemn seriousness only a child could possess. She began to speak in fragments at first. Bits of her story spilled, hesitant but unguarded. Nights spent alone under a pale moon. Men who had looked at her like she was nothing. Doors slammed in her face. Whispers that told her she would never belong. The cowboy listened, steady and silent, allowing her words to settle, accepting the truth of each sorrow without judgment. Outside, the wind carried whispers of the past, drifting across the canyon walls. And then, shadows moved in the distance, the faint rhythm of horse hooves over dry dirt. The cowboy's gaze sharpened, scanning the horizon. Someone watched, someone waited, and the tension throbbed through the air like a silent drumbeat. The girl noticed it too, her pulse quickening, but she did not tremble. She was small, but her courage had begun to bloom, fragile yet tenacious. She had survived more than most in that harsh land, and her survival had tempered her like steel forged in fire. The cowboy crouched beside her, whispering that they would not be caught unaware. Together, they planned quietly, eyes meeting in unspoken agreement. Hours passed with careful preparation. The dog padded along the periphery, alert, sensing tension in the wind. The boy's small hands tied bundles of kindling and sharpened sticks, a quiet force of loyalty and love. They waited, breathing in rhythm with the land itself, listening to the canyon hum beneath the sun's rising warmth. The villain arrived as shadows stretched long again, a man hunched in purpose, eyes cold and accusatory. He had come seeking blame, punishment, or perhaps the satisfaction of cruelty. But he did not account for the quiet strength of those who had learned to endure. The cowboy's hand rested on the hilt of his worn revolver, not in haste, but in readiness. The girl stood beside him now, her spine straight, her voice clear. She spoke, recounting the truth the world had refused to see. Evidence hidden in a discarded letter, marks of deceit long ignored, all laid bare with the calm conviction of someone who had waited for justice rather than demanded it. For a heartbeat, the villain's gaze faltered. The town's whispers, carried on the wind, seemed to gather strength in their quiet support. The boy stepped forward, a tiny figure of unwavering loyalty, reminding everyone that courage does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers, persistent, until it cannot be ignored. The confrontation was brief, almost elegant in its restraint. No frantic gunfire, no unnecessary chaos. The villain's schemes unraveled under the combined force of quiet bravery and truth. The girl, once thought fragile, stood tall, and the cowboy beside her was both shield and witness. The shadows of the past receded, leaving only the warm light of survival and acknowledgement. Even as the threat dissolved, the prairie seemed to exhale, its dust settling once more over the mesas and sagebrush. The wind carried a different story now, one of triumph without spectacle, of courage without fanfare. Later, by the fire, the cowboy tended to small chores while the girl traced the flickering flames with her fingers. Laughter came quietly, a gentle note that filled the spaces where fear had once lived. The boy told stories of his day, of small victories and imagined adventures, and the girl smiled freely for the first time, a smile that reached deep into the heart of the canyon itself. Time slowed in the warmth of the cabin. Outside, the sun dipped low, painting the world in hues of amber and rose, echoing the promise of new beginnings. The cowboy's gaze rested on the girl and the boy, a soft approval in the lines of his weathered face. They had survived, yes, but more importantly, they had been seen for what they truly were: brave, alive, and full of quiet fire. As night fell, the girl looked to the cowboy, gratitude and something unspoken shimmering in her gaze. She understood now that safety was not just the absence of harm, but the presence of respect, care, and recognition. And she had it in abundance. The boy leaned against the dog, both of them dozing, a peace hard-won and well-earned. The cowboy stepped outside, letting the canyon swallow him in shadow and starlight. He looked up at the sky, constellations reflected in his eyes like memories, and whispered a truth only the prairie could fully understand. Life is fragile, but courage, kindness, and love endure. In the soft darkness, the story lingered, not as a tale of tragedy, but as a testament to what the human heart can endure and overcome. The girl slept peacefully, the boy dreamt of adventures yet to come, and the cowboy remained vigilant, a silent guardian of what mattered most. And somewhere, just beyond the horizon, the world remembered again that even in the harshest dust, hope persists, quietly, stubbornly, beautifully. If this story touched your heart, remember, courage is often quiet, and kindness can save lives in ways you may never see. Where are you watching from today? Share your thoughts, like, comment, and subscribe for more soulful Wild West tales that linger long after the fire burns low.